Welcome to the All Ambient podcast, where we dig into the creative process, hear untold stories, and explore the brilliant minds behind some of the finest ambient music out there. I'm your host, Mike Graff. I'm excited to be in this together with you. Let's get going. Again, welcome to the podcast, everybody. My name is Mike Graff, and I make music as Dear Gravity. It's great to be here with you. It really is. I am so grateful to get the chance to connect with Anita Tatlow today. Before we dig into that conversation, I want to say a huge thank you to All Ambient. That's all-ambient.com. What an incredible music licensing site for all things ambient and cinematic music. If you are a creator and you are tired of digging through catalogs that have a bunch of music that might not be the best fit for your project, for any project, All Ambient is absolutely the perfect licensing site for you. Every song that's on All Ambient has been expertly curated. There is nothing on the site that doesn't feel great. And even better is that there are curated song bundles that are all designed around an individual theme or feel that can fit your film, video, your project perfectly. It's absolutely a great solution to your music licensing needs. Go check it out at all-ambient.com. That's all-ambient.com. And if you use the promo code podcast25, you will save 25% on your order. That is a huge savings on an already great deal for some incredible music. And fun fact, when you license your music on a site like All Ambient, you can know that you are directly supporting the artists and allowing them to continue to make more and more music in the way that they do, so that you can continue to make great projects in the very way that you do. What a cool thing. Go check it out at all-ambient.com. My guest today is the incomparable Anita Tatlow. Anita is the voice behind many, many projects in the ambient and cinematic spaces. You will very likely recognize her beautiful vocals no matter where you go in the genre, but certainly behind her flagship project with her husband, Ben. And of course, I'm referring to Salt of the Sound. I love hearing things more from someone who's vocalist forward, where that's the first line of thinking that they go through in their art. It's really refreshing and it's really complimentary to a lot of what I do, a lot of what many of us do. And it was just such a joy to connect and to hear more of what drives Anita. So without waiting any longer, let's get right into my conversation with Anita Tatlow. All right, folks, today is a special day on the All Ambient podcast, and I do not say that lightly. I am so excited to be here together with the voice behind countless projects that you've listened to, the voice behind Salt of the Sound, Narrow Skies, the better half of the man who brings Antarctic Wastelands into the world, amidst a ton of other projects that she has contributed her signature vocals to. We get to welcome none other than Anita Tatlow to the All Ambient podcast. Anita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I feel like, I don't know, I've been in the shadows of all of this going on, hearing from Ben and stuff, and here I am. This is fun.
Well, you may have felt like you were in the shadows, but really you are such an integral part to everything. And I was thinking about it, really. As I was prepping for the interview, I was like, man, there are a lot of really great producers and musicians in the field and all that, but so very few of them do you actually get to hear, like vocally do you get to hear. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, this might be the first like vocalist that we're having interviewed on the podcast. And I think that's just one of the coolest things, that of all the different ambient, artists that people are listening to, you might be the most recognizable for the sake that your voice is out there. And so I think you're probably just the queen of the show, really. This
I'll take it.
It's kind of revolves around Anita in the best way possible. But we'll talk more about that as we go. So very excited to dig in. Why don't we just back it up a little bit, Anita? I'd love to hear kind of the start of the music journey for you. And I know Ben's story, and we got to share that when he was on for Antarctic Wastelands a few episodes back. But I'd love to hear your side of things and how music became a part of your life as you were growing up, and where there were different stages changes of like, wow, maybe this is something that I'm going to be spending quite a bit of my time with, committing quite a bit of my life effort to. What did that music journey look like for you?
Well, thanks for having me. This is great. Yeah, I think some of our paths crossed a little bit. Me and Ben, we met doing music, but I think my journey started obviously much, much younger. And like a really pivotal moment for me was must have been like 6 or 7 or something. And we had a teacher at like elementary school, you'd say, primary school. And she kind of was auditioning this choir. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. I like to sing. And so I went and she kind of was auditioning. And then she just kind of, as I was singing my solo bit, she just kind of stopped and was like, wow. And I know you do that for kids. Now I know as a grown up, you do that for kids and you're kind of like, oh, wow, that was great. But I noticed that wasn't a regular thing that she was doing for people. And I also, it stuck with me and she would continue to kind of elevate me. I had solos going through school and she encouraged my parents. She was like, hey, Anita should have singing lessons. She's, there's something there.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate in that my extended family, so on my dad's side, my aunt was a singing teacher. She was a very good classical singer.
Oh, wow.
And my grandma taught me to play the piano. She was a very accomplished pianist. I was really, really fortunate in that way because I don't know if my parents would have had all the funds to kind of give us lots and lots of lessons and things like that. But I'm so grateful that I did because then I went on to study music at university. Always thinking, oh, this is a great backup, like with whatever I do in life, have a degree, have a, something to fall back on. I loved it. I was talking with Ben about it actually, and I was like, I love how well-rounded it made me as a musician to study different elements like at university level. So it kind of started super young, but then you get to this place and it wasn't like super performance focused. I did do piano performance for a while. I'd done kind of all the grades in singing and all of that. And then I think all my family were like, well, why is she singing in this kind of like contemporary style? Why does she do that and not sing like classical? But I think the techniques that you learn, having a really good vocal teacher, like I use that all the time. I've used it in like when I've been in other roles. I was a teacher and did some of that as well. Just all the things you learn about like technique and breathing and how to make specific sounds. And then I listen back and how it comes across. And anyway, it's like, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for that whole journey, for like people being in my life who I just feel like should have been in my life and like encouragers. And I think that's one thing I'm kind of even now reflecting on is like, how can I be an encourager to other people and like children, for sure, but also adults. People need encouragement in what they're doing. In this industry, you need encouragement. You need people to kind of cheer you on. And we've got to have each other's back. So this is great that this podcast does exactly that. So
100%. Well, and being of the abundance mentality and us all, cheering each other on, like we're all in this together. Your success is all of our success. Like, what a joy to watch friends and really feels like family to thrive. I just feel like it makes us all better as opposed to like we're fighting for some proverbial pie, if you will. It's like, oh, like if, I want to try to steal some attention. Like, man, we're just all in this together. We are all, when you put out something great, I know that it just inspires everyone in our circles and beyond to just continue making great stuff. And thanks for paving the way in that for sure. Yeah. So when Ben was on, we talked a lot about kind of the Antarctic wasteland side of things, which I love everything that he's doing over there, but we did not get into the Salt of the Sound side of things very much. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how Salt of the Sound came together. So Salt of the Sound, of course, being the compositional, ambient, cinematic, incredible moniker that you and Ben have been doing together for, man, has it been 10 years now?
Like 10 years, 11 years this year. Yeah, it's kind of
Whoa, man, congrats on that. That's a big deal. I love
mad.
it.
Yeah.
That's wild. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about, especially how, with some of your training, across all different, styles and techniques, how it began to fall into place that you guys found the sound that you did and you found the way that you approached. Like, was that an intentional thing or was it more of you were just making what felt good to you? Or just kind of explore it, widen that out for me because I'm real curious.
Yeah, so Salt of the Sound was our first project and has kind of remained like one of our main projects. It's also what we dub as kind of like a Christian ambient project. It definitely has that kind of spiritual side to it. More so than like Narrow Skies was kind of like an offshoot because we were like, hey, we're writing more poetic, more different things. And then we had other projects because it's just so helpful to have like multiple things because when you're creative, you're like, I have too much to put in this one. But to begin with, we did try to put everything into one. And we were creating, we were like, okay, we feel like we want to create kind of spiritual Christian music. What does that look like? And our early stuff, my goodness me, I cringe a little bit at hearing it. But it's great. Like, it's part of the process, right? I do not shout about it. Don't go back I wouldn't go back to 2013 and listen to those things. But it's like, it was also just such, it's so inspirational, so pivotal, and so like needed that you go through that process, I think, as an artist. And so, we didn't land at the sound that we have straight away. We're very much just kind of it was more songwriting. And we put it out there, and I think that was the right thing at the time. But I don't think it was, because I think if you're trying to hone your craft and kind of be like, oh, where am I getting to with this? You would never release anything ever. And that actually taught us with Salt of the Sound that the sound is always changing. So with some of our EPs, there may be a little bit more acoustic with some strings and stuff, but there's always like an ambient element. And I think that came in fairly early on, maybe kind of 2-3 years into it, we had this kind of ambient element. We released an EP called In Prayer, maybe 2016. And it was kind of like this journey, like a kind of 17-minute, I think it is, journey. And there's about 7 songs in there. So they're quite short, but it was like, there were some parts that had vocals, like they kind of weaved in and out. And then there was some instrumental stuff. And that was eye-opening for us to be like, hey. And like the industry at the time for me told me, hey, you've got to fit this mold. And here is a song structure, and here is what you need to do. Whereas actually, with Salt of the Sound, we've pushed that. And often it's funny because it's not the stuff that gets into the Spotify playlist. It's not the stuff.
Sure. Yep.
Like, it's not what they're looking for because it doesn't fit the mold. But we've developed this over kind of 10 years, this following of we have a good number of followers on Spotify and various other platforms, but also an email list of people who kind of write to us. And I mean, it goes kind of deeper for people. Like, it's very meditative music. It's very, hopefully, kind of restful, peaceful, healing music for people to just kind of, sometimes you need that time. In fact, over the pandemic, people needed that.
It was like
ambient music, just like,
everyone needed it. Oh man.
Yeah. So it was definitely a process to get to the point that we are, and I'm so grateful for that. And now we're just kind of riding that wave a little bit and seeing, and it's great because then it allows you to be like, okay, if you're in a kind of songwriting rut, or if you're in a kind of creative, I don't know where this is going, then we have other projects, which has been like amazing.
Yeah, for that to play so many different, there's so much to jump on here. But to be able to continue to create and not to chastise yourself because what you're in the mood to create is not necessarily lining up with that particular moniker's lane, and you're like, well, hey, let's do this other thing. I think that's such a great, it didn't always exist in that way, or I don't think that was a very common way of thinking, or not it was more the exception rather than the rule. And I love that it's becoming more of the rule. For anyone who says, well, it just means, it's more confusing and it's more crowded. I'm like, man, I just want to have more healthy artists out there. And if them having, 2, 3, 4 monikers is the way that they're able to curate what they do in a way that lets them fully express, I'll try to figure out the confusion. Let's go for it. That sounds great. But truly, it's not a burden to bear by any means. I'm loving where it shoots off for you, Anita, because I know clearly that you, along with Salt of the Sound and Narrow Skies, you also are releasing music just under your own name, your own moniker. You have this EP that you put out last year, Lights, which is the Anita Tatlow EP. That is you as your solo moniker. But then also alongside that, I see you collabing and partnering with all these different artists from around the planet, and really from a lot of different genres per se. And I think that is just such a great thing for you to be. It just makes me smile to see all the different directions that it's going. So tell me a little bit about that. Was that, whether it was the goal from the beginning or not, I'd love to hear more about how the wings started to spread, because I know that you've got a lot of great material in you, and kind of what you said, like when you're creating and it doesn't fit this moniker or this, this project, that you just want to slide it to another one, which is great. But then, how did it start folding in with these other collab artists? I know you've even done stuff with Ben with Antarctic Wastelands, kind of collabing on those 2 monikers together. How did that begin to come into form? Was that a master plan of yours, or did you start getting approached by people and it all of a sudden was like, this could be a really cool thing? Let's explore that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think, how did it start? So I started writing, I'm always writing. So I was writing some music and I thought it was like Narrow Skies, which is kind of a more, I would say like earthy project, kind of inspired by the world and like climate and all kinds of things like that. We began writing that when we were in Sweden, that project, very inspirational, very similar to Minnesota in kinds of, in terms of like the climate, winters and the, all of those things. Living a very different life in the tropics right now in Hong Kong. So.
Oh my goodness. Are you ever? Yeah.
But I was writing, I would say it was like kind of dark poetic stuff. Yeah, there's a couple of tracks on there like When the Lights Are Gone and Diamond Skies, which I was just like, I'm so happy with this. And Ben and I were like, this is not Narrow Skies. This is just, and so Ben was like, well, you can always release it under your name. And that was just for me like the most like freeze point. I was like, okay, if I release stuff under my own name and people don't like this, I feel like that's a rejection of like part of my soul. It was the most daunting thing. And so we released them and the kind of it, I think what I have to just remind myself is so many of these things are like a slow burn. Yeah. But it is like this collaborative thing that's so good. Like, so Marshall put us in touch with Storyblocks because they were looking for, which is a licensing site that for creatives. And said, hey, they had reached out to him and were like, hey, do you know any like female artists? Because we're looking for more female artists. We want to kind of expand our pool of like who we've got on this platform. And so that's been a great thing.
Boy, do I ever know someone. Yeah.
So that's been great because I think some of that side of things has taken off, like just in terms of people knowing about it, not in terms of like anything else through that. And you realize, you've got to have these like, well, that's a whole nother conversation is having these multiple kind of areas that you put music into. And so it was alongside that, we were being approached for collaborations. We'd done a few collaborations with Narrow Skies, but we felt with some of the stuff that was coming through, it was a little bit more in the dance genre. And oh my goodness me, how many subgenres I'm learning about in this melodic, progressive, trance, dubstep place.
Need a dictionary for all of that. Yeah, absolutely.
And those are base levels. But some of it we were like, this is not Narrow Skies. And so again, it was kind of like, well, maybe I could collab because a lot of the time when people are approaching me about that, it's kind of like, hey, here we have this track. Can you write lyrics? Yeah. And so there are a few things happening along at the same time. Some of it was, hey, can you create an ambient piece, which is often like wordless oohs and kind of soundscapey things and kind of experimental vocals. And then alongside that, I've got these kind of dance pieces that I'm writing that are being released on kind of Sakura and Monster Cat Silk and other labels. Yeah. And so I'm doing all of that now under my own name, which feels really kind of weird and kind of against the model of having multiple monikers. But also it's kind of like I feel like I am an ambient artist. I feel like I'm a songwriter and I feel like I'm a vocalist, if you like, for the EDM movement.
Absolutely. Well, and to watch it all kind of play together can be a really fun thing, right? Like there is something to stretching those who might be following a moniker like, hey, I kind of want to take you in a little bit of a different direction. My classic example of that will always be when Radiohead made the transition from OK Computer to Kid A, which is Kid A is like, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with either of those albums, but they went from like the, the alt rock band all of a sudden into like glitch-tronic, like weird, like pseudo ambient, dark, moody. And I was in love with it. I thought it was so, but like, I think part of the fun of that is just having listened to them and then all of a sudden for them to do a pivot like that, it almost tells a different part of the story instead of it living, singularly on its own. So I think there can be something fun to that as an artist, as Anita Tatlow, to kind of weave a few of those things together. And you never know, it might nudge someone in the right direction, someone who came for dance stuff, but needed to hear, something a little bit more organic on this side, or vice versa, somebody who had that and they just all of a sudden needed that unique pep in their step kind of thing that an EDM track would bring to their day. You never know. You got to just kind of trust the process a little bit. And if it feels right in your gut, then you go for it, right?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So with Salt of the Sound, we see like a lot of people go to our profile and they play it through. And that's what they do. That's kind of their listening experience. I don't know if that happens in the same way with kind of the stuff I do, whether it's more like, oh, they found this in this playlist, they found this in this playlist. But the collaboration piece has been one that is like, because people are kind of like, oh, so you're in Hong Kong, you're a musician. Do you do like bars and like stuff in the, and we're like, no, none of that, nothing like that. And that's what they think when you say, hey, I'm a musician. Yeah, exactly. I'm none of that. And they're like, okay, well, how does this work? And it's like, well, we work with people all over the world. And it's like, I think, I'm working on every continent. I think my only continent that I have left is like Antarctica to work with someone, maybe.
But you do get to cheat a little bit because you're literally married to someone who's got the word Antarctic in his, in his mouth. So I would almost count that if I were you. Okay,
that's good. All 7 continents, right?
There you go. Well, and how many people live? Does anyone? No.
There's people on some kind of substation, scientists, but they're scientists. So, I mean, I don't know how much music they're doing on the side.
It's true. Oh gosh, I just had this awful idea of recording a remote album in the substation in Antarctica because no one else has ever done it, ever.
Right. Okay,
be the first.
I think there's funding out there for that somewhere. There's definite Swedish funding out there for that. They will fund anything.
It's crazy. I was going to say, with your guys' Swedish, the amount of time you spent in Sweden, and with me being from, the cold part of the U.S., I think we might be able to we might have the fortitude that we need to endure the wild climate of Antarctica. Well, anyway, I digress.
Just let me go.
So much fun. I love all that you're involved in that, Anita. And tell me, I really, really didn't mean to brush this over, but I think it's probably, I just defaulted to it because I know how much Ben and I have worked together on different projects and how great of a producer and musician he is. But you've been playing piano for decades at this point and involved in just that whole side of things. How much do you delve into the keys side or the compositional, like getting into maybe even a little bit of the production and the sound design? Is that something that you're like, yeah, I love this. This is my thing. Or is it the sort of thing where perhaps growing as much as you clearly have in your vocal prowess that it's like, I think I'm good on, the vocal side and I don't necessarily need this other thing? Or is it a balance? Is it this one day and this the other day? What does that look like?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of piano stuff for a while, but I am Ben's go-to kind of like pianist to record stuff in if needed. And although he does a lot of his own stuff now, which is really cool. But I will also, I think when there's like a more prominent piano-esque something going on, I think I'm more in the kind of post-production stages, like, okay, no, that note wouldn't sound like that if you were playing it, or it shouldn't sound like that if you were playing. I'm very aware of those are that's stuff I learned like late on. Like I had a very good teacher at university. Yeah, and I'm so grateful for that. And like just sometimes like pedaling and stuff, I'm like, no, we need to like tweak it. And which is great because you can tweak it and pretend you played it imperfectly. But yeah, and that's like really good. I'd probably, well, now that I'm I've just stepped into kind of doing this as my only, I say full time. I've got 2 kids, so it's probably part time, but it's like I'm not employed otherwise. So we're just both working now
which is incredible. A big congrats on that. That's a huge, I love it. And I'm so very excited for you.
It's been a decade in the works to get to this point, but we're so grateful. Not a day goes by now that I'm not grateful. But I think definitely that's something I want to do a little bit more of. And I feel like I'm just kind of scratching the surface with some of this stuff, and especially like the vocal, like what's possible in the ambient space, because there are no rules. One of the things that I think has been really interesting is going back to Salt of the Sound. People have kind of said, hey, you are pioneers of this ambient Christian genre, because before that it was like this Christian music and there were not so many subgenres. Yep. But there's definitely now an emerging Christian ambient scene of people who are doing that kind of thing. I think it's so necessary, so needed. Yeah. But I think also with the ambient genre and the vocals in ambient music, that again, I feel like it's not untapped, but it's an area that's just kind of waiting. It's like rumbling. It's like a volcano kind of under the surface. Like there's so much that could happen. And there's so much, like even as I was doing like a collaboration last year, I think it was, maybe even the year before. And I started doing these sounds, and for a song, I think it was called Seafarer's Hymn. And I started doing these sounds and I was like, oh, this is really, it was kind of like more like a Swedish, like maybe Swedes would not say this. There's an old fashioned kind of coolning, which is like cooling. I'm probably saying that wrong. Mm-hmm. But they used to like, I think they used to do it to like herd cattle or something. And they used to like kind of call out into the...
Yeah.
But it's that kind of like, this is a good comparison. So in Frozen 2, like Aurora, how she kind of sings in that, I was like, oh, that's so cool. I was like, I would have loved to be that person. But she, just kind of like the what is possible, the kind of using your voice as an instrument, but not just being like, oh, we're doing ambient, so it's lots of oohs. It's like, okay, where can we take the voice?
Yeah, it is the continued exploration of it. And I think that's such a big deal when you're willing to look beyond kind of the conventional way that it's approached. Even if for nothing else than to just like soothe an itch, a creative itch that you have in the back. You're like, let's try this. This could be fun. And, if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit, but you tried it. I think that there is something pretty special to you just looking outside the box, being willing to look outside the box and just try things instead of, okay, well, here comes some Anita Tatlow signature ambient vocals. And there you go. But which is still a wonderful thing in and of itself, but to also be in pursuit of that signature, continuing to widen and continuing to like find an ever broadening definition of itself, I think is a really special thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you never know where something's going to go. And that's the really interesting thing. Like something that you can feel like, oh my goodness, this was like, I'm so proud of this. This was my best work ever. Like everyone's like, okay, great. And then it dies a death. But I think that's been really interesting in the collaboration process because I've done collaborations with people that I'm kind of like, oh, I think this is cool. And I had one recently where I was like, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Yeah. And the collaborator was like, okay, but it's a bit mainstream and I don't think it's going to go well. But all right, we'll send it to a label and see. Yeah. And the first label we sent it to, they were like, this is amazing. No changes. We're done. Yeah. Like, when can we release it? And it was a decent label. And that was really interesting. And I felt the same the other way around. So it's not like I have this perfect kind of vision of like, oh, I know what's going to work. And that's been really interesting because you never really know what like's going to land with a label. Sometimes you end up having to release stuff just yourself because no labels will take it. And then it kind of is a slow burn or it takes off or it's just kind of there. But it's there in the world. And I think you need that as a creative to be like, okay, it's out in the world. And whatever happens with it, you kind of obviously you hope that some people might listen. But right. I think just putting it out there as well is kind of so important as a creative. Yeah,
it's a true surrender to the process. And it's not gambling in a sense, but like, you truly do not know what the results are going to be. Even if, with as much of that intuitive, like, I really love this, that doesn't always mean that it's tied to this is going to be a landmark success, a cornerstone of my entire catalog, and people are going to come flocking and like those things, they happen and they're great, but it can be very difficult. This is something that I kind of come back to pretty regularly. But if I start measuring success based on how other people respond to it, that is cute, but it is a roller coaster that I have absolutely no control over whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so for me to find satisfaction in, did I put in the work? Do I personally feel like artistically satisfied by it? And am I continuing to not just show up and be proactive, but also like to grow? And if I'm doing those things, then it's a success no matter if 2 people show up or 2 million people show up. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of that same dare in you and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Yeah. Yeah. Anita, so many cool projects that you are a part of, and I love every one of them. Tell me a little bit about what's coming up ahead. Is there anything that you're in the middle of working on or that has wrapped and is mastered and is just waiting for being distributed to the world? What do we have coming from Anita in the next little bit here?
Yeah, so I have a new EP that I've been working on, and I think the creative process of this has been really interesting. It was actually Ben's idea, so I need to give him a little bit of credit. Amazing. And so it's a 5-track EP and all the songs have Latin names. So like the title track being Nocturne, which means belonging to the night. And then there's like Aurora, Vespers, Solis and Sanctus. And they are all collaborative pieces apart from one. Although I say one because I don't know if I've collaborated with Ben on it because he kind of does some of the producing. But the 4 of the other tracks are all collaborations with different artists. And how we did it is I basically chose keys and recorded like a sample with a title. So I recorded like Vespers, which means whispers. And so the vocals kind of have that, there's whispering elements in and amongst it. And then there's one called Aurora. So it's kind of like, you know, wanting it to sound a bit more like the dawn, and then the sol is like the sun. So then I recorded these kind of like ideas-scapes, if you call them that. And we sent them to the various collaborators and said, okay, free reign. What are you going to, how would you interpret this? How would you? And the stuff that has come back is just like, okay, wow. Like, I'm just
so fun.
Yeah. So I think the first release is with Cephas Azaria, and I'm super, super excited. Like what he did with it, I'm just like, my goodness me. And so I love that creative process. I love that it's all tied together, but it's also so different. I love that, like, thematically, and I really wanted to kind of, I think with ambient vocals, where I'm at right now is I want to tie in the kind of the spiritual and the natural and the ethereal, and like, that's what I'm trying to get to with this. And so I think I collaborated with you when I did a release before, just as me. And then, so that's kind of, you do these things and you're like, oh, this could be a really good kind of like starting point of like just inspiration for what comes next. So I'm super excited about this. I feel like as an artist, I love when it's not just like, oh, here's a song. Like there's a, with EPs and albums, you can kind of go like, okay, what's the concept? Where is this coming from? And sometimes, and amongst the collaborations that kind of come in as like one-off here and there, or you're part of someone else's release, or like it's really nice to have a kind of like, okay, here's my rounded project that I'm kind of putting out in the world. So that's really exciting. That's coming like March, April, kind of over a few releases as singles and stuff.
Amazing.
And then figure out something else for the end of the year as well, I think.
I cannot wait to hear that EP. It's going to be incredible. And then, of course, for anyone who would like to license it, I heard there's a great premier licensing site called All Ambient.
That heard about it.
Would be a great place to go. Yeah, it's pretty great. Well, I have a feeling that this is probably not going to be the last time that you're on the podcast, and I feel like we could just keep going for hours, but I do not want to hang up this conversation before we get the chance to hit the all ambient lightning round. Are you ready for this?
Let's see. Let's go for it.
Let's see. And for what it's worth, you don't have to answer short. It's not lightning like one word answer, but it is lightning in the sense of what is the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you the question. So here we go. No holds barred, just whatever comes out. What are you currently geeking out about right now? Is there some new release that somebody's put out that you're just in love with? Or is there something in like the vocal world or the software world? Or is there something, I mean, even like outside of music, is there something that you're like, I absolutely love this? What are you geeking out about right now?
Do you know, this is nothing to do with music.
Amazing. So let's go.
Yeah. So we were on a plane last week, and it was the first time I was able, my baby slept for 2 hours on the plane, which was great. And it was the first time I was able to put like earpods in and watch Netflix. And I was like, this is a dream. But I realized, and how it's related is I was like, oh, I just had this like downtime. It was the first, we've done like 2-3 flights with our kids, both of them. And it was the first time I was like, okay, I feel like I have some downtime. And when we were on vacation, I was like, oh, I feel like I have some downtime. And then I started to feel creative. And so I was like, I said to Ben, I was like, oh yeah, I need to watch Netflix, do some cooking, have my time where I'm just not thinking about anything, so that then I come back and then I feel super creative. That's nothing helpful to any producers out there, artists.
That's not even one of the requirements at all. I love that you found a thing that was recharging, and you're like, I think I'm going to be better at all of life if I just take this moment for me.
Exactly.
And with young kids, I mean, you got to grab those moments when they show up. For sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the best mom answer ever. Just You said an hour's worth of everything just with, yep, it was perfect. It was anyone out there as a young parent, solidarity. They completely understood what you just said. That's awesome. Oh man. Okay. Next question of the lightning round. What is one weird thing about you that most people probably do not know, Anita?
That's a really good question. I like to run in the cold.
In the cold, all right.
Yeah. So I when we lived in Sweden, I did a marathon. And
did you really? What time of year?
It was May.
Okay.
But it was
still.
It was fine. It was like 20 degrees. It was fine.
Yeah.
But the training was like from January in the snow. And I was like, oh, I like this. But I don't run here because we're in Hong Kong and it's like plus 25 degrees Celsius. It's like, it's too hot. But we went back to the UK over Christmas. It was too cold for us. We are now tropical people.
You have adapted quite to
in a major
the
way.
New environment. Yeah.
But I was running like every other day. Like it was great, like 5 miles. And I was like, I just love it. And so, I mean, for me, I think it's like this balance, this having like these places where you get the headspace. Like, and it's really funny. I said I did that as a, like when you do like 2 truths and a lie, I did that one time, in a public setting, which is why I bring it up. No, people didn't get that about me. And I was like, oh, okay. I said the other one was like, I have a tattoo or something. That was a lie. And so, but I've done I've run a marathon and I don't think I'd do it again. I'm glad I did it. Tick box. Yeah. It was kind of like, can I do it? It was like mentally, can I do it? Yeah. That was my question.
And you did it.
Mm-hmm. So
that's amazing. Well done. Next one. What is something that you believe that almost nobody agrees with you on? And you can be as lighthearted or as controversial with this one as you want. It could be as silly as some food that you think is the best that no one else likes, or it could be something pretty seismic, whatever you'd like to do.
So something I've learned, and maybe this is deeper than the answer that you want, but
sure.
I think like this idea that joy is something that we create for ourselves, like finding joy, like living in different cultures. I have like experienced like people who just have this innate joy. And then I've met people who are like, I've never experienced joy in my life. Like, and a very culture here in Hong Kong, I've met some people who've kind of, for them, that's the case, like the extreme of emotion, I think.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I try and do is like practice gratitude. And we're trying to do as a family, because our 4-year-old at the moment is just being a little bit complainy. And so we are kind of like, okay, what's the one thing you're thankful for? Because, thankful people create joy. But I don't think everyone agrees with me that you can kind of cultivate joy and a joyful existence. And it's not like you go, and the difference of joy and happiness, like for sure. It's like, it's like finding joy in the small things. We just went on a trip to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia just for a few days to mark the beginning of my kind of really jumping into this music full time. I just found so much joy in like, we went on a treetop walk with our 4-year-old and he just loved it. And we went on like these small things, and like the playgrounds there are amazing, but just so like cool. In just
I saw
like
a couple
the new
photos, they looked brilliant.
Yeah, a great place. And going to the Batu Caves, which is this temple, was just like on my bucket list. And I notice a difference in how I travel versus like how I travel or how some people I know travel. Yeah. And so like traveling with my parents, they need to be wowed. Whereas like I really try and find the joy in like the small things and like the experiences. And I think it feeds into the rest of life and the rest of existence.
I love that. Well, and I think that joy, I mean, it is communicated through your art as well. Like, I think it just, however you want to measure that, but I think the way that you embody that, it just, feeds through everything you do, not just your interactions with, with your family and with everyone else, but also through your art for sure. So I love that. That's a great answer. Amazing. Okay. Final question for you. If you were approached by someone who wanted to follow in your footsteps as an artist, as a vocalist, as just, the multifaceted talent that you have, what advice would you give that person trying to follow in your footsteps?
I would say like find yourself a really good producer that you can work with. So I'm not a producer.
Sure,
Ben does he kind of produces, figures out my vocals after I kind of do the easy bit. And that
Hardly. You think it's easy. It is so crucial what you do, and it makes or breaks everything. So you bring the A game. Yeah.
But I think that's Ben and I are kind of a partnership in that. But I think if I wasn't married to Ben, if I didn't have a producer husband, I think that would be like my key thing is like, okay, who am I? Either I learn it myself and I am the producer, or you've got to find someone who you trust.
Yeah.
And it's got to be that, like, because sometimes I'll push back on Ben and sometimes he'll push back on me, and we can do that mostly without conflict. Like, we can get to a place where we're both happy. And then you also, I think one thing that's great about that as a vocalist is that you've also then got a second pair of ears. But it does take a while to get to that space where like he was recording my voice in a way that I was like super happy and we were producing it in that way. And to figure out the voice, and my voice is quite airy, quite high end in some places, which can be really, really nice. But if it's produced in the wrong way, it sounds absolutely awful. And so Ben's never done that, thankfully. It took me a long time to be like super comfortable with giving it to other people, being like, here are the raw vocals. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, having that side of it, because then you still have like a level of control of, and we often send stuff to people with kind of like, hey, here are some kind of sample effects and like what we would do. And then sometimes they do something different, but it's like, it's a helpful part of the process. But yeah, having a good producer that you can trust, that you really know, I would say.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Well, and if I were to ask the same thing to a producer, they would say having a great vocalist is exactly what you want. So, I mean, there really is beauty on both ends of that, and your willingness to work with the spectrum of producers and projects and artists. You really go the extra mile to not only just to bring, your signature thing to the table, but also to really make it fit the moment. And I hear that and I see that in you left and right. You do such a great job with that. And man, if what has already come out is just the early taste of it, I cannot wait to hear what's coming down the pipeline. I cannot wait to hear this new EP and everything else that is in front of you. Anita, it is such a blast to be in this together with you and the projects that we've gotten to do together already. I'm excited for more. Thank you for just being such a vibrant example of what it is to do what you do well and to do it in such a great space and encourage others right alongside of being an incredible artist. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing everything with us. It means the world.
Thank you. That's really kind. Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to the All Ambient podcast. Music throughout today's episode is all from the catalogs of the many monikers of Anita Tatlow. And you can find all of this music along with a bunch of other incredible songs, bundles, and other resources from an amazing group of composers and producers at all-ambient.com. And be sure to use the promo code podcast25. That's podcast25. And you'll get 25% off of any product at all-ambient.com. It's a great opportunity to save even more on an incredible resource for your next film, video, or project. Don't wait for another second. Head over to allambient.com and use promo code podcast25. Again, that's podcast25 to get 25% off of your next purchase. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so you can catch every conversation we have with all these incredible people who share the same passion. I'm looking forward to the next time. I hope that you are too. Can't wait to see you then. And until then, have an incredible day. Here's hoping that this music and the heart behind it makes your day and life that much better. See you next time.